welcome back. Episode 2 of what they call the off season, but there is no off season if you really believe that. Thank you for tuning in to the Cyclone Fan Perspective. As always, brought to you by the Play the Fight Song podcast, where we cover everything college football related during the off season and during the regular season, as we're diving into the coaching carousel, recruiting news, and everything else that is college football centric. But you are tuned in to the Cyclone Fan Perspective for all things Iowa State football related. I am joined by a special guest. He's not a recurring guest tonight. Special guest, birthday boy, Justin, my brother. Justin, how we doing?
Not doing too bad. Still recovering from that Brock Purdy loss last night, but basketball team got another big win this weekend, so we're doing pretty good.
Yeah, we appreciate you giving us your time on your special day. And maybe what do we start with first? Your tag says Cyclone basketball fan, but
yeah, I know it's a little against what we got going on here, but whenever your team's ranked in the top 10, you gotta pay respects to that. So
the top 10 Cyclones. But I think people want to hear a little bit about our thoughts on the Super Bowl that happened. I mean, everybody had their eyes on it. Everybody watches the game. Cyclone fans in particular probably had either a side because most of them are Chiefs fans or most of them are Brock Purdy fans. Any thoughts on, let's start with just Brock in general. What did you think of his performance on the game? You got any thoughts to take away? Is he still a game manager?
No, he is not. I was pretty happy with how he played. I mean, being like all things considered, that's a guy who's in his second year in the NFL, probably like his 20th start or something like that. And to be able to go up and play against Patrick Mahomes and like go in overtime and give your team a chance, like that's a pretty big deal. I know he's been in the spotlight so long since he's been in the NFL because, I mean, Mr. Irrelevant, it's kind of a big deal when you're starting like that. But no one's really taken into account that he's just a second-year quarterback, and like being in the Super Bowl and going toe-to-toe with Mahomes, it's a pretty big deal.
Well, I mean, and it says something too. I don't know if you saw that today. Like the 49ers are first in odds to win the Super Bowl next year.
Yeah, that kind of surprised me.
That surprises me as well. You would think it would no question be the Chiefs.
Yeah.
But maybe it's the three-peat factor. People don't think it will happen because it's never happened. I don't know. My thoughts on the game, I wasn't too that invested into it. Obviously, I would have loved for Brock to win, and I'm just not a Chiefs fan in general. I thought he made the throws that needed to be made, like on fourth downs. He made a bunch of good third down and fourth down throws that needed to be made. He just never, I hate to say it, but he just never made the game deciding throw, if that makes sense, and that sucks because that's all anybody's going to be talking about today is how he's not the X factor, but you're comparing him across the field to arguably the greatest that's doing it right now. I don't know. I don't want to be greatest ever.
And I get that, but he also never hurt his team. And who else in the playoffs? Like who else in the playoffs this year went out and like made like those game-winning drives? Like Jordan Love played really well against the Packers.
Yep. I was going to say he played better than Lamar.
Even in the Chiefs wins, like against the Bills and the Ravens, like they never went out and like had like these game-defying drives. Like Purdy's drives in the NFC Championship were like some of the best quarterback play we saw playoffs.
Yep, absolutely. And I thought he played better against the Chiefs than definitely Lamar. Josh Allen, maybe, but definitely better than Tua. And I think even if it was not 20 below, I still think he's better than Tua. So
it's hard to say that. It's hard to say that any other quarterback besides Mahomes played better than Brock this postseason. And that's a two-time MVP compared to a 2-year starter. So,
well, guess what? Stephen A. and Ryan Clark need something to talk about for the next 7 months. So they're probably going to bring it up, but it is what it is. And I think real football fans know that Brock is definitely here to stay in the NFL, which is really cool to see in his young career. All right, let's give you the rundown just a little bit tonight. We're obviously going to cover more things in the offseason. We have a lot of recruiting news that I kind of want to touch on. If you haven't been paying attention, they're starting to ramp up a little bit in the 2025 class, the 2024 class. Some of them have enrolled already. We're kind of starting to see that come in. New guys are getting on campus, and some of the 2024 class is finally getting some of the recognition they deserve. Just something to note before everybody gets on campus here in the summer. But the big topic I think we want to cover tonight is not only coaching changes, but the Big 12 win totals that have come out. Justin's already he's dived into a couple of win totals already that not just Cyclone related that we'll talk about, but Big 12 teams in general. We are definitely here for it. I need to hear his thoughts on all things.
No need to bury the lead.
Not all right. Well, we'll definitely get to that, but let's cover some of the basics here first because it is important. Some coaching changes with some of the things that have been happening at the Iowa State program. You had the running backs coach and special teams coordinator Jordan Langs. His contract wasn't renewed, so they needed to fill that position. Obviously, with the Tyson Veit leaving to go to Cincinnati, that was another position you had to fill. Iowa State basically went in-house, you could say, not technically, but they really kept it that way. To replace Tyson Veit as the linebackers coach, they went and grabbed Colby Cratch, who was at North Texas last year, I believe, is another linebackers coach there, maybe a little bit of defensive coordinator, some play calling stuff, but I think he was mainly just linebackers. This is a good pickup for Iowa State. He was a GA at Iowa State from 17 to, I believe, 19 or 20, and then was an assistant of director of player personnel for the last 2 years before he headed to Denton, Texas. On the other side, because they didn't renew Lang's contract, they promoted Jake Waters to running backs coach. Honestly, big takeaways. I think this is just kind of what Matt Campbell's staff does. Like at this point in Campbell's tenure, he's gone a little bit outside of his coaching realm. I think Lang's was one of them, but like it only lasted a year. I don't know the specifics on why they didn't renew his contract, and I don't want to speculate, but Campbell trusts his staff. And until this staff and his guys, until they start losing football games, I'm going to trust Campbell and who he brings in. I don't know what you think, Justin. It really doesn't matter. I think he wants guys he's familiar with. I think that's Matt Campbell.
No, yeah, for sure. I mean, like you said, everything that they're doing is culture focused, and I think that starts from the coaching staff. Like those guys got to be on the same page if they're going to make anything work. So, I mean, keeping the
Absolutely.
familiarity around with this team, especially with how many starters they're bringing back, you don't want to switch up too much, I don't think.
Yeah. And Vite was so important to those linebackers, and that's such a key part to our defense. Bring somebody in that's familiar with that position and developing that at Iowa State. Absolutely. I love that. And I think Jake Waters, some people are familiar with the Jake Waters name. If we remember, he was before his coaching at Iowa State, he was a receivers coach at UTEP, but he was a big name in college football as the quarterback for the farming rival in Kansas State. So I think it's a good hire there. On the special teams side, the special teams coordinator side, I know fans are kind of rolling their eyes, but like Chris Williams from Cyclone Fanatic has reported on Twitter before, like towards the end of the year, Campbell was calling special teams duties anyways. It really wasn't Lang's position anymore. And if we've seen it, Justin, I don't think they could put me or you out there as special teams coordinator. I think they just need to get a damn kid that can kick. And they did last year, and it looked well. So
Yeah.
I really don't think it's the coach that is that important to that position. I think it's a kicker. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, and I mean, last year they cleaned up a lot of the mistakes that we unfortunately were been getting used to. So I don't know. I don't know if that was all on the new hire there or if it was just Campbell starting to clean it up and put a little more emphasis on it. So if they can keep that going, I think they're doing just fine.
Yeah, let's get rid of the special teams woes that Brock Purdy apparently cannot escape since it
Did
cost him Super
you
Bowl last night.
did you see Josh Pate's tweet?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He
He
twe
said
he tweets out, "If Brock Purdy loses this game because of special teams, I'm gonna lose it," or something like that, and then, like, it was just flooded with Iowa State comments, like, "You've clearly never watched this dude's career."
that was PTSD for some Iowa State fans last night. We just can't get rid of it. We can't get rid of it. All right, let's dismiss the special teams talk for tonight. Let's talk about a little bit of recruiting. Okay, the 2024 class is really starting to get on campus. Obviously, now in the new college football era, kids can enroll early. They can go during the winter cycle. I believe 13 guys from the 24 that were from the original 2024 class have enrolled. This class, I've looked into it a little bit. I like some of the guys. I just don't think it's a great class. I know that fans have kind of had comments about that, but that's recruiting at Iowa State. Sometimes you're just going to get some big hits, and sometimes you're just going to have a whatever kind of class. This team ranked, I think, from 24/7 like 69th in its composite ranking. Not so nice, by the way. You don't really love to see that. Um, it's whatever. Like when you're this young, anyways, you have what'd you play? 5 true freshmen last year. everybody, you're bringing back 20 of 22 starters. Like, you can afford to not have a great recruiting class. And I've said it before, Iowa State's a developmental school anyways. So they're probably going to pull 4 or 5 kids from that class who are going to have massive impacts. Maybe not next year, just because with all the returning production, but in a year or two down the road, sophomores, redshirt freshmen, I can definitely see some kids making some big impacts from that recruiting class, from the 2024 recruiting class. Marcus Neal, the safety from Kansas City, he was moved up to a 4-star. He was a guy who thought was going to go to Kansas State. So Iowa State did end up getting 1 4-star from the class. That's kind of a win, I guess. He's getting a little bit of recognition, which was nice to see. And then you had Bo Goodwin from Kingsley Pearson. He was moved to a 3-star. And then receiver from Utah, Dominic Overby. He was also added as a 3-star. If you don't know anything about recruiting, basically, if you get a Power 5 offer or if you're a Power 5 commit, you are automatically a 3-star if you're not a walk-on. But I will say with Overby, I think this kid was a diamond in the rough. Iowa State offered him really late. Washington State picked up on it. They offered him. And then Oklahoma State was trying to go after him at the end. He didn't get all of these offers and didn't commit until December. He's a 6'4", 180-pound kid at receiver. And I don't know if he'll make an impact this year by any means, but that's definitely somebody to keep an eye on if he can develop at Iowa State in 2 or 3 years. Let's move into the 2025 class. This time, Iowa State's making some huge moves early. It's really rare to see this many early commits, especially since basically the 2025 class just started. Because they got 3 3-star commits, Iowa State is ranked 31st in the recruiting class. Side note, that will not stay there. Iowa State does not recruit at a top 30 level, but that shows
Not
how
yet.
aggressive Iowa State is early. What'd you say?
I was saying not yet.
Not yet,
Just
yeah.
just because we haven't seen it doesn't mean we can't see it yet.
We're going to need a couple of 4-stars if we're going to really want to keep this class there, but hey, we'll see. That was another thing, not to get sidetracked, but Josh Pate, your boy that you just mentioned, he was a guy who sent out a tweet that he thinks, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago, Justin, he thinks the
Yeah.
Brock Purdy stuff it could have a huge impact on recruiting at Iowa State.
The extra attention definitely doesn't hurt. So
He thought
see where it goes.
he did say that the Super Bowl win would have definitely impacted Iowa State. I mean, it don't matter to me. I think Purdy's going to be around, and I think it's going to continue to shine a good light on Iowa State. But let's talk about somebody who's kind of Brock Purdy, kind of a similar story. If you want to get into it, we're not going to say this kid's Brock Purdy. I'm not going to be the kid that says that. But Iowa State goes and gets the kid from Algona, quarterback Alec Mansky, the 4th-rated player in the state of Iowa. The story that everybody's telling about him and Brock, yes, he did get an offer from Texas A&M. Brock also turned down Texas A&M for Iowa State when it came down to it. So that's really where it lines up there. Nothing else really compares as far as a kid from Arizona to compare to a kid from Algona, Iowa. I think this is awesome for Iowa State. I think he could be a fringe 4-star kid if he has a huge senior year next year. He could get bumped up to a 4-star. I could definitely see it. Held plenty of Power 5 offers. Offensive tackle from the Porter State, your backyard. You go and get offensive tackle Will Tompkins from Cedar Falls. A big get for Iowa State to win an offensive tackle battle for a kid who's on the east side of the state, and people who are unfamiliar with that. When you're in Iowa, the University of Iowa's backyard, to win that recruiting battle is huge. Like, before Matt Campbell got here, that doesn't happen. You don't win that recruiting battle. Not to mention, let's list off some of the other names that you beat out for it. Penn State offered this kid. Tennessee was big on this kid. He visited for a junior day. He offered him. And then USC went and offered him 3 days before he committed to Iowa State. He's only a 3-star. He's the number 8th ranked player in the state of Iowa, which isn't huge. But Justin, any thoughts on this kid in particular? I'm sure it caught everybody's eyes probably just from the offers, I'm assuming.
No, I think you nailed it. Like, exactly. Like, we can get an offensive line recruit over Iowa in-state. Like, that's basically all you need to say. That traditionally has not happened in the past, and it's always good to keep guys home, especially like a position of need that we've struggled with.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's go to the other line of scrimmage. Another big win. They go and get 3-star Trey Verdone. If that name sounds familiar, it is the brother of Malik Verdone, Iowa State star safety. He was very similar to Malik's recruiting, under the radar. He only had one Power Five offer was Louisville, like Power Four, I guess I would say now. Iowa State and Louisville were his only offers, just like Malik. Malik didn't have much coming out of high school. This is huge. It's kind of crazy that two brothers, one's going to play defensive line and one plays corner, just kind of a different build. If I will say, he doesn't have many offers. If there's one assistant coach on the entire team, position wise, that I trust to develop, it's Eli Rashid in the defensive line. That's been the biggest difference in Matt Campbell's tenure, is the difference in defensive line play at Iowa State compared to 10 years ago when you weren't even in the same conversation as when Texas was around, when Oklahoma was around. This is a coach in Coach Rashid who everybody loves. He's been around for Campbell's entire era. And just look, I mean, the list goes on and on. Jaquan Bailey, Will McDonald, Ene Wazarike. Like, the defensive line is huge. So to get not only somebody who's already had success in his bloodline at Iowa State, I think just this is a big get for Iowa State. I'm really excited to see this kid. So
Mhm.
out of those three, Justin, does any of them excite you at all as far as catching your eye?
I mean, anytime we get a recruit, like especially an in-state guy at quarterback and tackle, two like super important needs, I feel like that's pretty notable. I'd also like to, I mean, shout out you. Like, I think it was our last podcast, like the day before he committed, that you talked about it. For those who don't follow along on the socials, Jake let everybody know about how big that recruit was. So that's pretty cool.
I think it's huge too. And for Mansky's purpose, Connor Mobley, the Southeast Polk quarterback, just enrolled this December. You have JJ Cole, two other in-state kids who
Hmm.
are ahead of him in class size. To get this kid to come, must like, what is Matt Campbell selling? Like, obviously, it's a really big deal of what that coaching staff is selling. If you're like, there's two other in-state kids who are a couple of grades ahead of you, and you can play here. Like that, I thought that was huge just to win that over when he could go to Iowa, he could go to Nebraska. Now Nebraska just picked up Dylan Raiola, but those are two local teams who are desperately in need of a quarterback. I personally think more than Iowa State. So big wins there. It's still early, but that is a great start to this recruiting class. I think people can be really excited about the 2025 class moving forward. All right, let's talk about the fun stuff. Big 12 win totals have come out. FanDuel, you are just sick because you bait people like Justin into betting on this stuff
It's not a
in
big.
in in January and February before we even know who's going to be on the roster here in 5 months. Big 12 win totals. I'm going to throw it on the bottom here for those who are watching.
Look at that.
We will talk about Iowa State specifically. And Justin, we'll obviously get your thoughts on it. Iowa State opened at a 6.5 for their line. It was juiced on the over for -170. Thanks to you for knowing that, because somebody may have taken that line. Now they're at 7.5, juiced to the under. You can get the over at 7.5 wins at +116. Spoiler alert, Justin took the 6.5 wins. Justin is a sharp. Okay. He's the one who changed it to 7.5. Explain your reasoning on why you got on 6.5 so early.
Yeah, all the money that I threw on there is really what pushed it over the top. But I mean, I was honestly surprised when it opened at 6.5. I know we kind of talked about what we thought some of the over win totals were, and it kind of surprised me to see what the actual numbers that came out there. Like Kansas State being at 9.5. I think obviously they should be a top two favorite for a conference, but
Yep.
seeing some where they stand at some of those lines that they think there is it 7 teams above us in the conference?
Yes, because I believe
7.
there's 5 teams, and we're
K-State,
terrible
Utah.
podcasting here. Look at this. We're reading off the bottom here. Yep, there's 5 teams.
Yeah,
There's 3 teams at 8.5, and then you have Kansas State and Utah at 9.5.
and it's not that like I mean, it's 7.5. I wouldn't have taken this in February, but like seeing it at 6.5, I don't think this is a team that's going to regress going into next year. I mean,
Yep.
we were 7-5 last year with a loss to Ohio and a loss to Iowa, both games that we could win this upcoming season. And if you can even go into conference play with 3 wins, like I think we're going to get 3 to 4 conference wins. So I don't know. I think 6.5 just felt it didn't feel like it took into account like all the returning talent that we have for next year's team, regardless of how unknown the conference is.
Well, we said 7 or we said 8, 8.5, which maybe we
Mhm.
were a little higher on it, but there were definitely Cyclone podcasts that I listened to that they weren't the only ones who had them at 8, 8.5 before this all came out. Would you double down? Do you think 7.5 is still a good number for this team?
I can see where people would take the under for 7.5, but yeah, I still think that's a good spot. I'm not gonna
Do you think
bet
the
on it
money's
yet.
do you think the money's worth plus 116 to take the over?
I think so.
You mixed
While it's
values
still
there.
plus money, I would say it is. I just we laid out the schedule last week, or not last week, whenever we recorded our last podcast. The fact that this team has 7 home games and a neutral
Mhm.
site game, I mean, that's a really big advantage that isn't really taken into account. We'll figure out how easy or how hard the schedule is when the season comes, but just having those extra road games or those games closer to home is gonna be a big advantage for this team.
Yeah, well, and another hunch of why I think this changed, and I didn't see like Kansas State and Utah before it came out, but if you go back and look, all of these teams and their win totals, like Kansas State and Utah, for instance, are also at plus money right now. Everybody that I've seen, their win total overs are all at plus money and are juiced right now. I don't know if Iowa State couldn't have been the only one that had some like minus 170 odds for their win total over right away. I would imagine maybe you could have gotten Kansas State at 8.5. And then everything switched. I don't know if it were people like you, Justin, who were just kind of hopping in on those
When I
odds.
took when I took Iowa State, K-State was at 9.5.
Okay. So maybe Iowa State's the only one
I
that's
don't know if
moved.
they've moved now, but when I initially checked, Iowa State's was, like, the only one that was, like, a greater than, like, a 150 difference.
Okay. I guess from everybody now for everyone's win total as of today being the 12th of February, everybody's got juice for the over. So before we break down everybody else, because obviously there's one team, Justin, you have to talk about and explain yourself. I categorized Iowa State's schedule and their wins into three categories. I said your should haves, your should, and your have to have wins. I'll list those in a minute. Your 50-50s, these could be pick'ems by kickoff next year. At this moment, I could see it going either way. I'll give you my 50-50 games. And then I don't say you're my last category is you won't be favored. That's just the way I'll put it. We're more than likely, I think we're probably going to lose this football game sitting here in February. It could completely change by September or maybe even July after the new transfer portal, the spring portal. It could all change. This is way early, but I want to break it down for what it is in February. So your shoulds or your have to have wins if you want to hit this win total. North Dakota, Arkansas State, two easiest answers, two non-power four schools, one FCS school. You got to win. You got to beat Baylor at home. This is a team right now that Vegas is not high on, and that could change with the change of DeQuan Finn at quarterback for them. That was a big get, but Baylor's sitting at 5.5 for their win total. That's not going to be a upper half team in the Big 12 as what I think right now. And you get them at home. You have to win that football game. Same thing for Cincinnati. I think this team is even worse than Baylor. You got to win that game, especially at home in late November. I don't think that'll be an issue for Iowa State. And then your one road win you got to have, you got to go to Houston and win right now. I know they just brought in Willie Fritz. They're making other moves. I believe that Donovan Smith is still the quarterback coming back for next year. I think he's a nice player, but they lost a lot of guys in the portal after Holgerson left. This is a team right now sitting in February. You will be probably a 6-point favorite at least. That's that if everything goes to plan. So those are 5 games you have to win to hit this total. 50-50s. Now here's what I got. UCF and Texas Tech, both at home. These are two teams who are sitting at 8.5 on their win totals. These are two teams who are higher in the odds than Iowa State is right now. And I see why. I disagree a little bit, especially with UCF, but I see it. So you got to take care of business and win both of those games at home. That's a 50-50 shot. Maybe the other way could be favored. You could put this game in the won't be favored category or like you'll be a big underdog at Kansas. Could be on the road. This is a team that brings back a lot. Again, Jalen Daniels will be back finally fully healthy as of right now. This is going to be a tough road game. Iowa State lost to this team 2 years in a row. Kansas is going to be a tough one. Right now, it's sitting at a 50-50. Kansas State at home with no question tied for first in odds. That's going to be a really good football team. I don't care if it's going to be at home, it's going to be a toss up. And then last one, these are games, no doubt in my mind, you will not be favored in. Your backs are going to be against the wall going into it. If you can steal one of these games, that's going to be huge for your win totals. At Iowa, at West Virginia, at Utah. Iowa State's really good at home. It's no shock that these 3 games are all on the road. I know I kind of ran through it a little quick. Does that seem accurate? Is there any discrepancy, any differences, or any disagreements that you think one should be with
Mm,
the other?
no, I thought you were pretty spot on there, but when you say, like, those games that we're definitely not gonna be favored in, Iowa, West Virginia, and Utah, yeah, we're not gonna be favored in that Iowa or West Virginia game, but both of those games, like, the spread's not gonna be bigger than 3.
I should have put a
It's
disclaimer.
not gonna be bigger than a field goal, and even those home games, I mean, they opened us up at 6.5 when the only spreads that I see that could be bigger than 3, a field goal, even if we're an underdog, are maybe the Kansas, Utah, and Kansas State game. So even if we're not gonna be a favorite, that game's gonna be a field goal game. So just to say that, like, opening up, like, maybe winning 6 wins, I think they are assuming that's like assuming that we're not gonna win a road game all year at Iowa, at Houston, at West Virginia, at Kansas, at Utah, which I get those are clearly gonna be the hard games, but I mean, what college football team, not too many college football teams coming off a 7-win season, bringing back 19 starters is gonna lose every single road game the following
No,
year.
no, absolutely not. No, I completely agree. And that's why we're on here and we're not completely biased. We're talking through it. And this is why it's good value. My disclaimer I was going to say is this isn't Iowa State in the Paul Rhodes era. Iowa State, theoretically, in my mind, could win every single one of these football games. Now, do not aggregate me and say I'm saying this team's going to go 12-0. But there's not a single game on this schedule that I would be like Texas last year. I said it. I just wasn't high on it. I didn't think we had a chance. And
Yeah.
we had a chance to win the game. But there's not one game on this schedule where I'm like, man, I just don't see it. Maybe Utah. But right now, I'm still talking myself into it.
But
So,
I think that's the beauty of the whole Big 12 this year, though, because, like, we look at Oklahoma State, who is right behind us at this point, and they were one of the top 2 teams in the conference this last year. You could
yep.
honestly say that K-State, Utah, Kansas, Texas Tech, UCF, West Virginia, and Iowa State think they're gonna win all the Big 12 games that they're in.
I think that's a good segue into our last topic. So, other interesting notes from these win totals that I thought. So you have Utah and Kansas State. Those are your 2 favorites. They're sitting right now at over 9.5 wins at plus 110. Your odds on to win the Big 12 if you went by odds on the win totals. It goes Utah, Kansas State tied for first. Then it's Arizona, UCF. I think UCF is up there just because on their schedule, because they get the 3 lowest teams in odds at Arizona State, BYU, and Cincinnati. They get them all on their schedule. Kansas and Texas Tech. Everyone else after that has 7.5 wins or less. Justin, Colorado right now, Dion, Coach Prime's team, America's team, is sitting at over 5.5 wins at minus 105. Gosh, man, I couldn't imagine somebody taking that bait and betting on that over.
I
So,
mean, calling
oh
it
yeah,
bait
what was that
calling
you?
it bait calling it bait seems a little degrading.
Maybe
I
in my
would like to
opinion.
say I would like to say that I took Colorado's over last year in March, and that cashed in early September this year, so let's not jump to conclusions too early.
Somebody might be onto something. I guess I could be in the wrong. Maybe they'll
No,
go 6-0 and lose their last 6 games like they did basically like they
it's
did for their win total last year.
it's possible, but their schedule is really tough. But, I mean, looking at all of the teams that have really low win totals, it just feels super dismissive. I mean, I know some people have to have low win totals, but I'm
Yep.
surprised by and maybe that's why Iowa State opened
Somebody's
up at
got to
6.
lose the games.
I'm surprised at the amount of 8.5 wins because, I mean, even look at, like, teams like Iowa State and West Virginia last year, like, no one thought they were gonna be worth a damn, and they were both competing to make Dallas in November. I
Mhm.
mean, like, these are some good programs down there, Oklahoma State, TCU, West Virginia, Baylor, Colorado, I mean, maybe not Colorado. Houston's got a new, really good head coach. I mean, a lot of those teams could make some serious noise in this conference. Like, it's just going to be such a crapshoot
I was
trying
surprised.
to over unders.
Yeah, no, 100%. But I was surprised by Texas Tech getting the 8.5. They were high on the odds last year. Disappointing.
Mhm.
They battled a ton of injuries all year. And West Virginia they're getting basically the same treatment they did last year. Their over under win total last year was actually like 4.5, if I remember. But again, this is a team who brings back everybody who won 8 games last year. And Vegas still doesn't think that highly of them. I didn't break down their schedules for you guys, unfortunately, but I just thought that was kind of interesting that Vegas still is high on Texas Tech and they're still not as high on West Virginia. Two
I
completely different styles of football, but I thought that was interesting.
It's pretty obvious when you look at it that these over-unders are based strictly off of schedule, and the
Yep.
problem with that is that I mean, well, what else are you supposed to base a win total over in February? But
It's true.
in the schedule is strictly like how tough you think it's gonna be is strictly based off of last year's season, and
Mhm.
that's just it. That's where you can get, like, values like Iowa State and West Virginia last year when teams turn out to be better than they were a year ago, and some teams are gonna regress. That's kind of why I put my money where I did with Iowa State and I guess Colorado. Another one I did was like Oklahoma because theirs was like 6.5. I just,
Yeah. Another
uh,
crazy one. That was
yeah.
another crazy one. And tune in. It, Tune into next week. I'm sorry. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to give you guys win total previews or breakdowns in this week's episode, but tune in the next week or two because we will break down all of the win totals in college football as we go on. Because what else are you going to talk about in February? Just kidding. It's the off season. We can talk about anything we want because this is our own podcast. That was fun. We kind of went through a lot in 30 minutes. People said we couldn't do it again, but here we are in February breaking down Iowa State football for you. So appreciate you guys tuning in. Justin, thank you once again for spending your day with me and everybody else
Having
who
me
wants to
on.
talk Iowa State football. We will be back with you guys once again. Again, like I said, we probably are trying to do these at least once a month. Hopefully, we got some more exciting news for you guys here in the upcoming future. Thanks for following us. Follow and subscribe at Play the Fight Song Podcast, Play the Fight Pod, as you see on the bottom, and tune into our live episodes every single Tuesday night or on Apple and Spotify. You can find us every Thursday morning. Thanks again for tuning in with us, guys. And as always, you know what it is from our top 10 basketball team. Go Cyclones.